Oh, carry me back to old Virginia, Lord.
New at 5, a Peninsula landlord who racially harassed and evicted tenants and defrauded COVID relief programs was sentenced to 17 years in prison today. David Merriman owned dozens of rental properties in Newport News and Hampton. In an exclusive sit-down with 13 News Now, federal investigators reflect on why this case is unlike any they've seen in their career. Here's Alex Littlehills.
Unique facet of this investigation from a hate crimes perspective, number of people who were abused by Dave Merriman, cruelty they had to endure.
A landlord of last resort, so he could take advantage of these individuals.
Been a federal prosecutor for 15 years. I have never seen a case like this, these civil rights violations against, everyday people in Hampton Roads.
14 years ago, I was looking for another house to live in because I was in a slum house that was infested by termites.
When Uganda Sample Jones needed a new place to call home.
And Dave had a house around the corner from where we were.
She didn't look far. She found David Merriman, a landlord who owns properties across Newport News and Hampton. But she couldn't expect choosing to live in a Merriman property would be a regret she holds on to still.
He is someone who is manipulative. He likes to get over on people.
Where most landlords repair their properties when needed, Merriman often wouldn't.
We had a ceiling leak from our top floor to our bottom floor. He left it a gaping hole in our roof, in our ceiling for about a few months.
In many cases, these properties were condemned. In many cases, they didn't have the things anybody would expect to have in a house. Appliances, furnaces, air conditioning.
According to a 58-page federal indictment against Merriman, he repeatedly refused repairing his properties, leaving them with faulty air conditioning, plumbing problems, sewage inside the homes where people lived. One renter even fell through the floor of his house filled with rodents because it rotted away. The details still stand out for Ted Rose, a former special agent with the FBI Norfolk Field Office, who investigated the case.
One stands out to me in particular. This woman had to walk her children down the street to use the toilet because the house she was renting from Dave Merriman did not have a functioning toilet in it. Rodents and insects crawling across the floor.
Piggyback on what Ted said as far as his business practices, he focused on vulnerable victims. Typically, it was minority females, single minority females with children.
Federal HUD investigator Robert Pladek adds that Merriman's targeted tenants were often those who are most vulnerable.
They really had no other choices. It was either move into a Merriman property or be homeless, essentially.
This is the first case where we have had criminal charges brought against a landlord for knowingly not keeping the property up to safe and sanitary conditions. They have to certify that the programs are held to a certain standard, and the facts here are so egregious.
But the federal investigation into David Merriman isn't only about what he did, but how he did it.
I think the uniqueness of this case, though, is the civil rights component of that.
Racist harassment.
Derogatory names, like, do you want me to say them?
That was Alex Littlehills reporting. Part 2 of his exclusive sit-down with the FBI airs tomorrow.
Carry me back to old Virginia. There's where the cotton and the corn and potatoes grow. There's where birds warble sweet in the springtime. There's where this old dark is hard and long to go.
Prisons are inherently secretive, so when abuse occurs inside, It's difficult to know. Over the last several years, NPR's investigations team, working with the Marshall Project, has twice exposed problems at prisons. The Federal Bureau of Prisons moved one troubled unit and later shut down another. Now, new reporting exposes problems at yet another federal prison. We're joined now by reporter Christy Thompson from the Marshall Project and NPR correspondent Joseph Shapiro. Hello to both of you.
Hi, Elsa.
Hi there.
So, Christy, this is based on your reporting. Can you just tell us where this latest prison we're going to be talking about is and what you found?
Lee Penitentiary is in a small town in a rural corner of Virginia, and we found widespread allegations of abuse from Lee that were all telling a really similar story. People were telling me that officers were pulling them into solitary confinement, locking them in shackles, forcing them to kneel on the cement floor facing a wall, and then beating them for hours with their fists and their shields. Many people also told me that they were four-pointed, which means each of their limbs were chained to a concrete block, and they were left there for hours. One man I talked to told me he now cannot walk and has to use a wheelchair because of what happened to him at Lee.
Oh, my God. Well, at Lee, I understand that there was one prisoner who took a risk. He collected the names and testimony of many people who had been abused. What can you tell us about this man?
His name is Marcos Santiago, and this all started when he was in solitary confinement, and he heard prisoners in the cell next to him being shackled and beaten in the same way that he said he was. So he started talking to them through the vents in their cell when officers had left the room and gathering their information. He even told me he wrote his notes in code in case officers caught on. And, you know, many of those stories went on to be the basis for multiple federal lawsuits that have been filed with a group called the Washington Lawyers Committee, which is a legal organization in D.C. And these suits are now trying to expose and stop this abuse at USP Lee.
And Joe, I know that you also spoke to Marcos Santiago. He's moved to a new prison, but what did he tell you about what he had experienced before that move?
The abuse that Christy and I have written about, it happens mostly when prisoners are in solitary confinement. The prison system calls it a special housing unit. Marcos Santiago calls it the SHU.
When you're in the SHU, they got complete control down there. You get to make a phone call once a month, but they're listening to all your phone calls. So you really can't say, help me, or, you know, because then they're going to hang up the phone on you. So you're really helpless when you're in the SHU.
And then when a prisoner is dealing with abuse, how can they report it?
There is a procedure, but our reporting has found it doesn't work very well. Before a prisoner can file a federal lawsuit, they need to finish going through the prison's internal complaint process. But when someone is in solitary confinement, they need to ask a guard to give them the complaint form. Maybe the same guard they're accusing of abusing them. So we heard over and over from prisoners who said they tried to speak out but got stopped. There's one rule that you have to write a complaint in pen. Ryan Amelia, the prisoner who now uses a wheelchair, he told us that guards wouldn't give him a pen, only a rubber pencil.
Flex pencil is like a little plastic pencil, like an orange, maybe 3.5-inch pencil. It's rubbery, so you can't use it as a weapon. And you can write with it if it's sharpened, but they sell it to you not sharpened, and you have no way to sharpen it. Everything they do there is to prevent you from being able to do what you need to do to hold them accountable.
Well, Christy, to report out these stories, I know that you communicated with dozens of prisoners through letters and phone calls, but you also reached out to federal prison officials to get their response. What did the Bureau of Prisons say about your reporting?
They told me that they couldn't comment on individual cases or on ongoing lawsuits. They said that the vast majority of their employees are honest, hardworking people, and that they hold people accountable, and that, you know, if people are found guilty of abuse, they could even face criminal prosecution. But it's important to remember that all this has been happening at Lee at the same time that federal prison officials are saying they're more committed than ever to stopping mistreatment. We've seen them close one federal prison and a federal prison unit because of abuse. But at Lee, lawyers and prisoners are telling me that this is still ongoing and maybe even getting worse.
That was Christy Thompson of the Marshall Project and Joseph Shapiro from NPR. Thank you to both of you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I'll tell you how it is down here. To do business with you and your women. Other than that, as far as we're concerned, you're completely off the record.
December 2nd was supposed to be the start of justice in Wyandotte County. After 2 years of home arrest, Roger Golubski, accused of using the power of his badge to abuse and exploit black women for decades, was finally set to stand trial. Except that morning, he didn't show up to court. It wasn't long before he was found, dead at his home of a gunshot wound to the head. Without a defendant to stand trial, the case was dismissed. And for the alleged victims, Golubski's death meant questions weren't answered. Instead, more were raised. And in the weeks since his trial was set to begin, the Kansas City, Kansas community has been grappling with his death. To make some sense of it, KCUR's community engagement team, Ron Jones, Laura Ziegler, Zach Perez, put together a community forum aimed at giving members of the Kansas City, Kansas community a place to share their stories, so that we can start to understand how they've been feeling, and to explore what justice might even look like now. We had intended for the session to be a way for the community to engage with their local elected officials, but many, including Unified Government Mayor Tyrone Garner, District Attorney Mark Dupree, Chief of Police Carl Oakman, and a number of county commissioners, all turned down invitations to attend the forum, some of them citing pending litigation. So instead, you'll hear a panel, moderated by our own Steve Kraske, of community members about what we know, what we don't, and how to move forward.
Well, Nikki Richardson, let me turn to you here again. She's with Justice for Wyandotte. You've had your finger on the pulse of this community for a very long time, and the alleged victims of Roger Golubski's actions. Tell us about your work with Justice for Wyandotte, Nikki, and what you've accomplished so far, and what are your goals?
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to do that. Justice for Wyandotte was created out of a group of mostly women who felt really strongly that the narrative of Lamont McIntyre's case, opening doors of wrongful conviction, was valid, but a big part of the story was missing, which was the sexual harassment of women. And our key focus at the very beginning was just to make sure that that narrative was understood and not overlooked, because it did compound on the generational trauma. So we have two things happening here. We have wrongful conviction of black and brown men, and then we have black women and brown women who are being sexually harassed. And this is going on for decades. And for me personally, the Lamont McIntyre case I was aware of back in 2017, but I had never looked at the court document myself. And it wasn't until 2020 when I actually read it in full and I understood Rose McIntyre's story and how that sexual harassment led to Lamont McIntyre's wrongful conviction. It completely activated me. I was working a normal job before all of this, and because of this case alone, I have dedicated myself to my community in every way possible. And Justice for Wyandotte has been a blessing as being an entity that I can do that work in. And so a lot of our support has been trying to help people get connected to legal resources, and not just that, but therapy for all of the reasons that are mentioned. Just to go through this justice process is trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. I mean, even throughout this week, I know for a fact that people aren't sleeping. You know, Roger Golubski was a real life boogeyman here in Northeast KCK. And I understand that it's a twofold conversation that we have to have with leadership, but that distrust just really breeds upon trauma. And how do you trust the justice system that has harmed you over those years? So Justice for Wyandotte has been working really, really hard on moving forward with making sure that not only the impacted families and the victims and the survivors feel supported, but the community know that there's an entity that will stand up to these institutions and demand transparency and demand accountability and make sure that you feel empowered. Because we do know, if you've lived here in Wyandotte County, we don't get a lot of support up top. And I find Peggy's podcast overlooked to be such a poignant description of Wyandotte County, because we oftentimes feel overlooked, especially in the Kansas City metro area. So we have been working really, really hard to make sure that people hear us across the metro and across the state. And we want to continue to do that. We want to continue to provide legal aid. We want to continue to provide therapy support. We want to continue to partner with organizations like MOXA to make sure that that happens.
Nikki, help me here. Based on your long experience living and working in Wyandotte County, how was a case like Roger Golubski's, how was this level of corruption allowed to go on as long as it did, year after year after year? How? Explain it to me.
Complacency. I think that
on whose part?
On the entire institution. I think it was complacency on the police department. I think it was complacency amongst the governing body. I think people were okay with the status quo and nobody wanted to cause any rumblings, and they didn't care honestly about the people that were being harmed. The part in Lamont McIntyre's court case that resonated with me, and this is a real traumatic thing to say, was that when Rose was being assaulted inside of the police station.
It's inside the police station, inside Roger Golubski's office.
Correct. A police officer walked in and seen this happening and then walked right back out. And that line I kept rereading because what it told me was that this was not the first time, that people knew about it and people were perfectly okay with it. And I think just that mere sense of just being perfectly okay allowed him to do it for years under everybody's nose.
And one thing I want our broader listenership to understand, those beyond Wyandotte County who already know this, is that the concern here is then, based on what you just said, that there are other officers who knew of this corruption, who took part in this, and none of those folks have been brought to justice. There hasn't been much spotlight placed in that direction. Roger Golubski's apparent death doesn't end this thing for a lot of people in this town.
Oh, most definitely. In Lamont McIntyre's case, other police officers are named.
Lamont McIntyre, the man who spent more than 20 years in prison for crimes he didn't commit because that case was investigated by Roger Golubski, who allegedly put him in prison without really the corroborating evidence to do so.
Correct. So those other officers get overshadowed by Golubski, and we understand, he is the big bad boogeyman. But there was a lot of other goblins and gremlins and monsters that allowed him to really fester in this community that I think assisted him in what I think we can define as sex trafficking that should be looked into. And not only within the police department, the prosecutorial misconduct that Dupree is talking about is also very much a part of this story. A lot of these victims were not only harassed by the police department, but they were harassed by prosecutors. Evidence was being falsified or not being used in court cases. People were being harassed, misinformation was being used, and so there was an entire system of bad actors that allowed so much trauma to happen to this community, and nobody talks about those people because Golubski is the name. Golubski is the name, and I just do not want it to get lost on anyone that this was an entire system that allowed this to occur.
So, Nikki, in the spirit of looking forward, of moving ahead here, what do you want to see happen in this moment?
I think at the very least we deserve some acknowledgement from our local leaders. We just have not gotten that in the least bit, just any form of empathy and compassion, but we definitely deserve some transparency. This case has always provided us questions, and this court trial was supposed to finally give us answers, and all we got was more questions. And so I really do think the community is just owed some transparency. And then I really do think we just need a dedication and a commitment to placing things in our community that prevent this from happening. Whether it is a policy change, a procedure change, a law change, a board or a committee, or all of those things. I think there needs to be a commitment from law enforcement leaders and elected officials that they're going to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Even if you can't right now speak to what you can do for the past, you can at least speak to what you can do to the future.
You know, Nikki, as the head of Justice for Wyandotte, have you had a chance to visit with Kansas City, Kansas Police Chief Carl Oakman, and what is he saying to you?
I have not been able to connect with him since the events of last week. I do sit on the Law Enforcement Advisory Board, but I am not sitting here in representation of the Law Enforcement Advisory Board because my feelings don't necessarily reflect that of the Law Enforcement Advisory Board. But Chief Oakman does sit on that board, and so I meet with him once a month. And the Golubski case naturally has come up a few times over the last few years, and there is a strong resistance to just, how do I say this? Yeah, there's a strong resistance in just even talking about it, addressing it. You know, I wasn't surprised to hear that he wasn't going to be here today. He really wants to focus on the good things that are going on right now, and that's all fine and dandy, and Chief Oakman is doing a great job for right now. But what does that do for the people who were harmed by a previous police department? And he doesn't seem interested in having that conversation, at least not at this time.
Khadijah Hardaway, the other half to Justice for Wyandotte. I am looking around and I'm thinking about the cases that we've advocated for, in particular Nico, who has a cousin who was attached to that particular case, whose case has never been solved. My understanding, the reason why is because they still believe that Lamont is guilty. The whole story behind Lamont's innocence is behind the prosecutor who had a relationship with the judge. And that's the reason why this case had, Lamont was released. So there is no indication of what actually happened to her two cousins. The mother of her cousin is still out here fighting as well. And I'm looking at Ophelia, who has two sons in jail. Same situation. And like Nikki said, there's lawsuits with all of these officers listed. Golubski was just one of 10 on that lawsuit. Inside of that lawsuit, it lists other Jane Doe, John Doe officers and the superiors. So it's like the entire department knew what was going on. Then we rallied to get rid of Chief Ziegler. And it turns out that he has a contract as an investigator of the police department. How does that happen? How do these people continue to build and capitalize off of the pain of the community? I want to say one other thing. And I hope everybody listens to this because this is something I've been preaching for a long time. Every murder that happens, no matter if it's a homicide or if it's by the police officer, it costs the state and the city an upward of $1 million and more. Sometimes it can reach up to $50 to $60 million. We don't even have life insurance to carry us to $25,000. These people deserve reparations, not just a reconciliation of understanding. This state, this city owes this community. And if we're going to go into truth and reconciliation, we really need to talk about reparations and what that means for these victims. The other part to that is that we are a very red state.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ophelia Williams, and I was Golubski victim after he came and arrested my two twin sons at the age of 14. Okay, now they 40. And they still in jail, and they 40 years old. And, okay, I got ready. You know, I was prepared to go to tell my story, what Gillespie, had done to me. And then all of a sudden, he was supposed to kill himself. I don't believe that. I haven't saw a body. The Wyandotte County, they being quiet about it. They won't tell nobody nothing about that murder. They didn't show a body. Everything was just secret about it. So since I didn't tell my story about my twin sons at the age of 14 and about me, so I want to know, what do I supposed to do now? I supposed to go home and lay down, close my eyes and go to sleep. I couldn't go to sleep. I stayed up weeks waiting on this trial. I stayed up all last night waiting on this day. I'm scared to go to sleep at night because if he didn't kill himself or somebody else killed him, then how do I supposed to feel?
My name is Nico Quinn. I've been having to deal with Roger Gillespie's corruption since 1984. I can even go all the way back to when my mother was beat by the police department when I was 5 years old. My sister was maybe 16, 17. She had got off of work. She was doing her clinicals because she was trying to become a nurse. She came in one night. My grandfather got drunk. Long story short, when she came in, she was crying. And me and my sister asked her what was wrong, and she told her that a police officer picked her up. She thought he was going to bring her home, and he raped her and told her the same thing he had told every last victim in here, especially me, that he would hurt her family, he would hurt her, or he would hurt her kid. I personally met Roger Gillespie in 1994. I am the one that they claim put Lamont McIntyre in prison, which I never said his name until I came in encounter with Tara Moorhead, who threatened to throw I can't say B.A. in jail if I didn't do what she wanted me to do. And that was to point Lamont out. And I kept telling her, he's too tall, his ears are too big. And I told her who killed my cousin, because the day before, they tried to pick him up. 2 weeks before, these guys jumped him and beat him. So I told him, and you know what he told me? When he met me in the back of Wyandotte High School, he told me, if you keep saying that name, his ex-girlfriend's body remains was found behind Washington High School. So this is a police officer that's supposed to be helping me with my cousin's homicide. But he's telling me that these boys that he got on his roster or whatever, his pay, is going to kill me if I keep saying their name. First thing we need in this community is we need healing for us. We need healing for all the, I'm not going to call them victims. We need healing for Rhonda Easley's family. We need healing for my sister and our entire family. We need healing for, and maybe some counseling for Monique Allen's family, Liza Mitchie's family, Sandra Bland's family. So what are we going to do as a whole? What are we going to do? He had been taunting me since 1994. He stalked me for 30 plus years. And I moved over 15, 20 times. I would leave out a full house and move. I moved to North Kansas City in 2006. He pulled up on the side of my house and told me I could never get away from him. He's going to find me. 2012, I was at the post office on 7th Street, right there. He pulled up on me. Why you running? I need to talk to you. Meet me. I'm mad at you because you snitched on me. Mentally, I was in prison from this man. I couldn't tell nobody nothing. He would pull up in front of my house. I don't care where I stayed. It took me to move out of Wyandotte County. It took me to move to Florida to get away from him. I came back. I had to move to California to get away from him because he kept finding me and following me. So what y'all gonna do? Because he's not the only one. He's not the only one. And I tell everybody here, when Tara Moorhead did me like that, she shouldn't be protected. I want her dreams because she took mine. Her and him took my dreams. I could have been a lawyer, a doctor, or anything. So what y'all gonna do so this won't happen again? Because it's steady happening. Steady happening. Little kids missing. What y'all gonna do? We are tired. I don't know if y'all tired, but we tired of this BS. Tired of it. I don't want no I don't care about no reparation. I want healing. Give me some sleep. Give me some peace. That's what I want, and I don't want to be in no grave to get it.
Medical apartheid. The dark history of medical experimentation on Black Americans from colonial times to the present.
One quick note before we begin, shortwavers. This episode talks about racial violence and references a lynching. Hey shortwavers, it's Emily Kwong, and today I am joined by one of KFF Health News' Midwest correspondents, Kara Anthony. Kara, it is really good to have you here.
Great to be here.
For a few years now, you've been reporting on how racism can make a person sick, and I think it often surprises people when we focus on racism as a health story, right?
Definitely, for sure. I mean, I'm a health reporter, and I'm also a Black woman, so when I look at an issue, those are two of the lenses I'm looking through.
Totally, yeah.
I started reporting for KFF Health News in 2019. That same year, a group of researchers found that Black men in the United States are about 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police than white men. On average, they found that a young Black man had a 1 in 1,000 chance of being killed by police, making it one of the top 6 causes of death for them. It ranked just behind heart disease and cancer.
Gosh, that's really devastating. Okay.
And the immediate impact of that number is clear for young Black men. But what's maybe less clear is the impact it can have on their loved ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
The community around them, the people who are dealing with the after effects of racism and violence.
Yeah.
And this has been going on for a long time. Think about what Black communities went through during the lynching era. So I wanted to dig into all of that and find out, what's the health impact of this kind of trauma? I talked to Aisha Lee about this. She's an assistant professor at Penn State and a licensed mental health provider.
For me, as a mental health professional, I get really cautious when using the word trauma. No one actually comes in and says, hey, I'm dealing with intergenerational trauma. Can you help me? Right? You know, they don't have the language. People don't have the language for it. And so part of the generational legacy of Black families is we don't talk about our problems. We just kind of roll through them. We deal with them. We're strong, and we just keep it moving forward.
Yeah, that message within families to just keep it moving. I mean, did you experience this in your own family?
Oh, for sure. And I'm not faulting my ancestors for that. Times were different then, you know. Sometimes that's what they felt they had to do to survive and to stay safe. But over time, Aisha told me that holding hurt in hurts us.
That silence, like, it eats at our bodies. It really does. It's almost like every time we're silent, it's like a little pinprick that we do to our bodies internally. And after so long, those little pinpricks turn up as heart disease, as cancer, as, you know, all these other ailments.
So Emily, for the past few years, I've been reporting on a small town that's been deeply shaped by this silence, Sikeston, Missouri. That reporting was the basis for a documentary and a podcast, both called Silence in Sikeston. I think Sikeston illustrates this intersection of racism and history and secret keeping. and how all those things combine to affect the health of an individual and of a community.
Today on the show, we are headed to Sikeston with Kara Anthony as she explores how racism and violence shapes health, how that echoes throughout generations, and how to break the silence within her own family too. Okay, Kara, so these are hard stories to tell, but you have put so much thought and care into this reporting. You've been working on this series for 4 years, and it's set in Sikeston, a town in the southeast corner of Missouri. Where do you want to start?
I want to take you back to 1942, because that year, a black man named Cleo Wright was lynched in Sikeston, Missouri.
I just never had seen anything like it. I had heard people talking about it, but I had never seen anything like that.
This is Mabel Cook, or Miss Mabel as she was introduced to me. She was a teenager in Sikeston in the 1940s, and she witnessed Cleo Wright's lynching.
We didn't talk about it. My daddy told us not to have nothing to be saying. He told us not to worry about it, not talk about it. And he said it'll go away if you not talk about it, He told us forget it.
A lot of black families went through that same thing. At the time, lynchings were a regular part of life in many parts of this country. What was surprising is that this case captured national, even international attention. It was the first time a lynching ever led to a federal investigation, meaning the FBI investigated it as a crime for the first time.
Wow, okay.
But Emily, ultimately, it came to nothing. The all-white grand jury was sympathetic to the mob, and with time, the story was buried, like nothing had ever happened.
Wow. Okay, so that was the state of things when you got to Sikeston?
Yeah, young people don't learn about him in Sikeston schools. Older people didn't want to talk about him much either.
Yeah.
And fast forward about 80 years, Sikeston is still dealing with racism, violence, and silence.
What do you mean by that?
Well, in 2020, Sikeston police killed a young black man named Denzel Taylor. Even though he was unarmed, the city's chief of public safety told me that officers believed Denzel had a gun and feared for their lives. The officers themselves declined to comment. Denzel's family later sued the city of Sikeston. The city and the family reached a wrongful death settlement for $2 million. Close to half of it went to legal fees. And in the wake of these events, there was a lot of silence. Emily, multiple people asked me why I was examining the deaths of Cleo Wright and Denzel Taylor side by side. As a health reporter, I wanted to focus on the trauma that remains after the violence against these men, the possible health effects for their families and their communities.
Oftentimes, people who experience racial trauma are forced to not acknowledge it as such, or they're forced to question whether or not it happened in the first place.
Keisha Bentley Edwards is an associate professor in internal medicine at Duke University. She studies structural racism and chronic health conditions, and she knows a lot about what happens to a community after a lynching.
When you're in a smaller city, there is no way to turn away from the people who were the perpetrators of a race-based crime. And that in and of itself is a trauma. To know that someone has victimized your family member and you still have to say hello, you still have to say good morning, ma'am, and you have to just swallow your trauma in order to make the person who committed that trauma comfortable so that you don't put your own family members at risk.
It literally requires you to silence yourself constantly as you're living your life.
Exactly. And Keisha says part of the stress comes from being black, being aware that you may be perceived as a threat just by being alive, just by going through your everyday life, which is a factor in black people's health. Here's Aisha Lee again.
Imagine every time you walk out of the door, your body, you're tightening your body, you're tensing up your body, and you're holding on to it for the entire day until you come home at night. What do we think would happen to our bodies as a result?
That accumulated stress from both institutional racism and the racism in everyday interactions, it has documented effects. Black people age faster, get sicker, and die sooner than our white peers. And chronic stress is a proven factor.
Okay.
And that ongoing reality of structural racism and violence is making it even harder for our brains to deal with stress.
That's what that hypervigilance does. That hypervigilance causes our bodies to tense up so that we can't fully breathe.
Yeah, that's exhausting. And as you were talking about it, like, I even feel my body just being tight as you are speaking about these things.
I mean, Kara, you're really connecting the dots here between like the felt experiences and the biological health realities of being a Black person in America.
Yeah, and check this out, Emily. There's a growing body of research that also suggests that living under racism could actually change how our genes work.
Oh, yes, I'm familiar with this concept. I mean, this field of research came up in my reporting covering racial trauma among Asian Americans. You're talking about epigenetics.
Exactly. Researchers are still trying to figure out how stress, trauma, and genetics fit together, but it's possible that stress can change how our genes are expressed. Now, that may sound like a small thing, but it can have huge impacts, like making you more prone to certain diseases.
Like cancer, diabetes, heart failure.
Exactly. And on top of how dealing with that in the present could be hurting your health, recent epigenetic research has also shown that things experienced by your ancestors in the past, your parents or grandparents or even great-grandparents, could also affect you.
You know, we're not at the point yet where we can, make these definitive connections that, yes, this specific gene expression has been passed down. But, we are passing down this idea of hush, right? Stay silent, don't fight, because you don't have power.
Yeah, I mean, given that, how do people move forward? What can be done to resolve this and stop these cycles?
There's no easy answer. I mean, short of ending anti-Black racism.
That is the thing. That's fixing the problem at its source, yes.
Yeah, that's a huge thing that's going to take all of us. But there's still a lot that can happen on a smaller scale in the meantime. There are hospitals that are trying to fix medical discrimination against patients of color, and doctors who are trying to practice what they call culturally competent care, meaning taking into consideration how something like racism could impact their patients' health. And then there's our own families. We can try to stop passing down those scars and start to heal by talking to our parents, our elders, the generation who came before us.
This pain has compounded over generations, and so we're going to have to deconstruct it or heal it over generations, right? Our generation and the generations that come behind us will have little pieces of the work to do. As we put mental health more so at the forefront, and as we start to communicate more and more within our families, that's how we engage in this healing.
And it sounds like, in some ways, your reporting in Sikeston has helped to catalyze some of those conversations.
I hope so. I reported this story for months before I learned new details about a police killing in my own family, and that's part of this series as well. I ended up learning about the silences in my own family history and dealing with the intergenerational harm that's been passed down. And I think about this all the time with my own kid, Lily, because since I started reporting this project, we've been having a lot of conversations.
I want you to know that we can talk about things, because when we talk about things, we often feel better, right?
Yes.
Can we keep talking to each other while you grow up in life about stuff, even hard stuff?
Like doing 100 math facts?
Sure. That's the biggest thing in your life right now. But yes, all of that. We're just going to keep talking to each other. So can we make a promise?
Yeah.
All right, cool.
So cute.
She's the cutest. And I really want Lily to know about her history. And part of that history is painful and sad, but I also want her to stay thoughtful and curious and encourage her to keep asking questions.
You are teaching many people, like the people who listen to your show, how to do it too. Thanks so much for coming on Shortwave.
Thanks for having me.
We're gonna pause this for the benefit of all y'all who never saw Soul Food. Soul Food is a movie about a big, humongous black grandmother, aptly named Big Mama. Big Mama demonstrates her love by feeding herself and her offspring enormous amounts of pig lard. Then, get this, Big Mama's arteries are so clogged, they gotta amputate her arm.
It was her leg.
Right, okay, whatever, leg. Then, she dies of a heart attack. Or another stroke, or something.
God called her home.
And what does the family do after she dies? They get together for a Sunday dinner and eat the same food that just killed Big Mama. The same food! They didn't learn a lesson. Nobody went on a diet, and that's the end of the movie.
The Food and Drug Administration is reviewing a petition to ban a food dye known as Red No. 3. It's been used for decades in thousands of products, maybe including some you've eaten, candy, chips, yogurt, soda, but consumer groups and researchers question the health effects. An FDA spokesperson tells NPR a decision could come soon, so NPR's Allison Aubrey has us ready. Allison, good morning.
Good morning, Steve. Great to be here.
What could possibly go wrong with a food product with the attractive name Red Dye No. 3?
Well, Red Dye 3 is a petroleum-based food additive. It's been used for over 50 years to give foods that bright, flashy coloring. It was once used in cosmetics too, Steve, but back in 1990, the FDA banned it after lab studies showed it could cause cancer in animals at high doses. Now, the FDA previously concluded Red 3 is safe for people in the doses they're exposed to in foods, candy, drinks. But last year, the state of California passed a law aiming to ban the use of Red 3, pointing to evidence that synthetic food dyes may exacerbate behavior problems in children.
Wow, a connection to the behavior of children, like it's, what, a psychoactive drug? Is that what we're saying here?
You know, it's been very tricky to assess the impact on kids' behavior. Think of all the things kids eat in a day, all the factors that can influence their behavior. So to suss out a specific effect of dyes hasn't been easy. But there is a fair amount of research, Steve. In California, officials actually reviewed about 25 studies. More than half pointed to a positive association, showing food dyes may contribute to symptoms such as inattention, hyperactivity. Other studies found no association, so it was a mixed bag. Earlier this year, the California governor signed another law to ban a group of synthetic dyes in school meals, including red, green, and yellow dyes. But Red 3 is the only dye in the petition currently before the FDA.
Does this mean the FDA could ban this dye the way that California did?
Yes, the FDA petition is seeking to eliminate Red 3 entirely from the food supply. Consumer groups argue there's enough evidence, and I'll point out it would be difficult to conduct new studies to prove a kind of cause and effect between food dyes and worsening behavior. I mean, what parent, given what's already known about synthetic food dyes, would sign their kid up for such a study? I spoke to Thomas Galligan of the Center for Science in the Public Interest. This is the group that has petitioned the FDA. He says there is no reason to add these synthetic dyes to food.
Red 3, like every food dye, only serves as a marketing tool for the food industry. It's just there to make food look visually appealing so that consumers want to spend their money on it.
He points out that Red 3 has been banned or severely restricted in many countries, including in the European Union, Australia, and Japan.
So what does the food industry do if they lose it here?
Well, we reached out to the National Confectioners Association, which represents candy makers. A spokesperson there tells us they're waiting for the FDA to conclude its review before commenting, but they say the industry is committed to food safety and that its products are made using only FDA-approved ingredients. I'll say the food industry has shown that it can pivot to more natural alternatives. About 10 years ago, when Kraft Foods decided to take synthetic dyes out of that bright orange mac and cheese, they replaced them with colors from spices such as paprika and turmeric.
Allison, thanks so much.
Thank you, Steve.
Tasty reporting from NPR's Allison Aubrey.
Black babies cost less.
People who grew up in foster care earn college degrees at rates far lower than the general population. A program in Virginia for former foster youth aims to change that. Its goal is to support college students of all ages with guidance and sometimes financial help while they work on their degrees. VPM's Megan Pauly has this report.
Good morning, Kiana.
Good morning, Miss Karen. Good morning.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, too.
35-year-old Kiona Beeman is meeting with Karen Cole, her coach through the Great Expectations program.
So, yeah, going into next semester, you do have kind of a heavier load than you've had. How are you feeling about that?
I'm very confident, especially knowing that I'm almost done.
Beeman is just 2 semesters from completing her associate's degree in business administration at J. Sargent Reynolds Community College in downtown Richmond. And she just got accepted to a nearby HBCU, Virginia State University, to pursue her bachelor's.
I am so happy and proud of you.
Thank you.
In their meetings, which happen whenever Beeman needs to talk, Cole provides her with regular encouragement. That's not something Beeman really experienced growing up.
People in the foster care system really need that push, that motivation.
Beeman spent a lot of time in foster care as a teenager. At age 18, she says she became homeless. Thinking back on those years, she says she never really felt like she had much support.
Basically, you just feel alone. You really want your mother and your father to be the one who pick up all the pieces, and they're just not there.
Great Expectations is picking up some of those pieces. The mostly privately funded program started over 15 years ago. It provides financial and emotional support for students like Beeman, no matter how long they've been out of foster care. There are no national numbers, but state and regional studies have found former foster youth earn degrees at much lower rates than the general population. An analysis of a study of 3 Midwestern states found only about 4% completed an associate's degree by age 29 or 30. But the graduation rate for students in the Great Expectations program is higher, more than double what that analysis found for 2-year degrees.
Their students are graduating, they're getting degrees, and they're entering the workforce, and they're doing really well.
Allison Gilbreth is with the nonprofit Voices for Virginia's Children. She advocates for policies that support foster youth. She says people who grow up in foster care can have a hard time settling into life as independent adults.
They have experienced numerous traumas. They are trying to figure out life on their own, and that's really hard.
Almost a third of youth who transition out of foster care report being homeless between the ages of 19 and 21. 1 in 5 report being incarcerated. That's according to research from the Annie E. Casey Foundation. Gilbreth says she thinks the Great Expectations program is important because it helps students meet their basic needs. The program offers housing stipends and helps cover emergency expenses, like for car repairs or to prevent evictions.
Housing is the foundation. When you feel like you are in a safe housing situation that's stable, you can start to think about the bigger picture. You can start to think about, what do I want? What are my dreams? No one can dream when they don't have anywhere to sleep.
It feels like they saved my life in a way.
26-year-old Alexandria Davis says after she started community college, her relationship with her then live-in partner got difficult and she needed to move. She applied for emergency funding through her school, and that's how she learned about Great Expectations. The program helped with her unexpected housing expenses and awarded her a monthly stipend for other needs.
That first realization of, wow, someone is there to help me, I think really opened my eyes to being like, wow, like, you know, people do care. People do care about me. People do care about my financial success, my educational success, my emotional success.
Now Davis is working on her bachelor's. She's studying marketing at Virginia Commonwealth University. She says without the financial and emotional support she received from the Great Expectations program,
I think I would have dropped out of school because I would go back into that same cycle of realizing, hey, I can't afford this.
While there are lots of programs across the country designed to help former and current foster youth get a degree, not a lot of them look like Great Expectations. There's a network of such programs called Fostering Academic Achievement Nationwide. A representative there said Great Expectations stands out for its, quote, comprehensive approach to supporting students at 2-year institutions. It's available at every community college in Virginia and helped inspire state lawmakers to fund more support at the state's public 4-year schools. That legislation took effect earlier this year and ensures that current and former foster youth don't have to pay for tuition or room and board. For NPR News, I'm Megan Pauley in Richmond.
Look at how they treat their children. Mark my words, Mr. Resendez. If it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to abuse one.
This is OPB. I'm Jess Hazel.
The community of St. Helens has been shaken by allegations of sexual abuse by teachers at the public school district. 2 high school teachers were arrested last month for alleged sexual abuse of students that went on for years. 10 St. Helens employees are now on leave as a result of the case. The deeply unsettling truth is, St. Helens is part of a pattern of sexual misconduct plaguing schools across Oregon and the country. With me to talk about sexual misconduct by educators is OPB education reporter Natalie Pate. And a note, this conversation will include descriptions of sexual abuse that might not be suitable for all listeners. Can you first briefly give us some background about what's happening in St. Helens and why this story has risen to this level of public notoriety?
Right. So to start, we need to go back to 2019. Former St. Helens high school teacher and coach Kyle Wrobleski was sentenced to more than 4 years in prison at the time for grooming and sexually abusing a 17-year-old student. Then this spring, the district paid out $3.5 million to the survivor and her family to settle that lawsuit. Now this fall, things came back into public view with TikTok videos by a former St. Helens student talking about ongoing sexual misconduct concerns. Law enforcement looked into that and last month arrested St. Helens High School choir director Eric Stearns and retired math teacher Mark Collins. They both have pleaded not guilty. Now, these arrests led to student protests and angry parents at school board meetings who were upset that things weren't handled sooner. The school board chair resigned, and the superintendent and high school principal have both been replaced. At the crux is the concern that school and district administrators knew about the allegations for years, but didn't respond or report it to the authorities like they're legally required to.
And your reporting found that this kind of abuse is not as uncommon as some might think. How often do students experience sexual misconduct?
Sadly, yes, that's true. So national estimates show about 10% of K-12 students will experience some kind of sexual misconduct by a teacher by the time they finish high school. And if we extrapolate that average, that's roughly 2 students per classroom in Oregon. One report described it as the largest ongoing sexual abuse scandal in our nation's history. Now, estimates vary by age and even region in the country, but experts say those numbers are likely low. Sexual abuse is largely underreported, and teacher sexual misconduct specifically is an understudied area. Abuse can happen at school, outside of school, online, through texting, and many offenders have multiple victims. And it's important to note that while we often hear more about extreme abuse and blatant assaults, the problem often starts with more subtle harassment and grooming. These are things like standing too close, inappropriate comments, and brief touches. And it can escalate to stuff like buying the students gifts to earn their favor, watching porn in the classroom, and sending nude photographs.
What kind of impact does that have, not just on individual students, but on a school as a whole?
Yeah. Well, for individual students, there's a lot of long-term consequences. They tend to have poor overall psychological well-being, higher likelihoods of attempting suicide or using alcohol or drugs. And those are just a handful of examples. And the systems of accountability and oversight often don't work. Some educators told me they faced a lack of support or even silencing from administrators when they reported allegations against their coworkers. One former nonprofit worker in an Oregon middle school who I talked with said she reported concerns to her administrators multiple times. They had some meetings, but little came of them. And she said the students who had confided in her often didn't get any help. And she described sobbing regularly after work, to her family, to her boss. She said she felt insane because more wasn't being done. And the way she put it was, quote, nobody talked about it, but everyone knew about it. And I think what we're seeing in St. Helens are clear examples of times when trust has been eroded. Families need to feel safe sending their children to school, and most educators are extremely dedicated to protecting and caring for students. But what happens when they don't?
It seems like there's this divide between what should be happening and how incidents are currently being handled. Is there a way for Oregon to bridge that gap?
Well, Oregon is already trying to address this in some ways. Oregon and Washington are 2 of only 17 states in the country that have 2 key protections in place to avoid what's known as passing the trash, or sending an educator who has abused students to just go work in another school or district. So Oregon and Washington both require that prospective schools check a candidate's disciplinary history and that previous schools disclose teacher sexual misconduct. And several states only require one of those or neither. But there's definitely more to be done at every level, right? Educators have to have a clear understanding of mandatory reporting requirements and how to report. And they have to do it when there is a concern. And this is tricky because people don't want to overreact. They, fear ruining someone's career, that things will get worse for the students, or that they'll be retaliated against for reporting. And sometimes nothing actually even comes from reporting. But the risk is that damaging behavior is allowed to continue and possibly get worse if they don't. Oregon lawmakers could also decide to criminalize educator sexual misconduct. It's already illegal for adults to have relationships with minors, yes, but some states have laws explicitly criminalizing abusive educators. Some states have also pushed for stricter laws that stop teachers from resigning without investigations when allegations have been made against them. Oregon and Washington are among a handful that already have some of those limits in place, but that could be explored. And of course, schools and families can work to ensure students who allege educator sexual misconduct are provided with adequate support and counseling.
Thanks, Natalie.
Thanks for having me.
That's Natalie Pate speaking with me about educator sexual misconduct. If you or someone you know may be a victim of sexual abuse, confidential support, information, and advice are available at the National Sexual Assault Hotline by calling 800-656-4673.
I don't want us to lose sight that things are getting better. Each successive generation seems to be making progress in changing attitudes when it comes to race. Doesn't mean we're in a post-racial society. It doesn't mean that racism is eliminated. But when I talk to Malia and Sasha, and I listen to their friends and I see them interact, they're better than we are. They're better than we were on these issues. And that's true in every community that I've visited all across the country.
A Simpsonville family has filed a lawsuit claiming Greenville County Schools was negligent in responding to bullying and harassment claims when it comes to their now 14-year-old daughter.
The suit claims the lack of response from administrators, faculty, and staff led to their daughter's attempted suicide.
The mother of the child sat down with our Destiny Chance to share a story you'll see only on WYFF News 4. We do want to warn you, some of the details may be difficult to hear and see.
It's another morning for this mother of three. Except there's no getting ready for carpool or packing a lunchbox.
Unfortunately, words do hurt. They used to teach us sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never harm me. Words are the one thing that we will carry.
Ty Turner, filled with emotion, speaking publicly for the first time about when her daughter was 11 years old, a student at Fisher Middle School. In the 24-page lawsuit her family filed this summer, it details multiple occasions where her daughter, Kalea, says another student physically assaulted her and called her a roach and a man.
There was no less than 7 to 9 times that I myself personally reached out to the school, and I had the emails, and half the time they didn't respond back, and if they did, it wasn't with anything of any sustenance. There was never any resolution.
Then, on March 17th, 2023, Turner says that became a day she will never forget. She found her then 12-year-old daughter hanging from a belt in her bedroom at home.
It was 11:18 p.m. when I found Kalea hanging. They couldn't find a pulse, and they couldn't find her heartbeat. There were grown men in that room crying.
She was in a coma for weeks, ultimately staying in the hospital for 101 days. And now, Kalea requires a trach, feeding tube, and she's nonverbal. She can't lift her arms, legs, or torso, and is completely dependent on her parents to function. WYFF News 4 reached out to Greenville County Schools. They say in part, quote, the district is aware of the allegations made by this parent and has addressed them directly with the parent. We disagree with these allegations and have conducted a thorough investigation and review of each allegation at the time they were made. While we do not agree with the allegations, our hearts go out to Kalea Takora Turner, her mother, and their family.
I don't think that parents understand how much more peers and how a child is received by their peers supersedes everything that you will teach them, everything that you'll pour into them.
In the meantime, Ty says each day is a fighting chance as she keeps faith alive.
They say all you need is faith the size of a mustard seed. I have way more than that. I have crazy faith when it comes to her. And so I believe that she'll be fully restored.
In Greenville County, Destiny Chance, WYFF News 4.
Ty says she's been attending Greenville County School Board meetings advocating for Kalea. Greenville County Schools says in part, quote, every school implements anti-bullying strategies and programs for students, including how to recognize bullying and how to report it, and adds, as is communicated to parents and students, Greenville County Schools prohibits all forms of bullying, discrimination, harassment, or intimidation, end quote. WIFF News 4 will keep you updated on any developments in the lawsuit. If you or someone you know needs help, you can talk with the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by calling or sending a text message to 988. Head to our website, WIFF4.com, for more information.
As that process continues into the evening, so does the work to sift through the life of Natalie Rupnow and what motivated her to violence. Investigative reporter James Stratton is in the newsroom. James, that investigation is pointed toward Rupnow's online activity.
And Kristen, investigators have not identified a single motive for the shooting as they comb through the social media accounts and online footprint of Rupnow. We've learned accounts associated with her show posts about previous school shootings.
Police are still searching for a motive for the 15-year-old shooter who killed a teacher and a fellow classmate and injured 6 others at Abundant Life Christian School. 12 News Investigates has obtained court records that show her parents divorced twice, once in 2014, remarried, and then divorced again in 2021. Records show Natalie was in therapy and her mother was asked to go as well. Natalie's dad had primary custody at this home in Madison, though she would visit her mom in Janesville weekly and on weekends. Her father's public Facebook profile shows the teen at a Sun Prairie gun club shooting skeet. In it, she's wearing a shirt for the German rock band, which gained notoriety because the band's shirts were worn by the Columbine school shooters. Law enforcement sources tell ABC News Rupnow's social media accounts featured content involving other mass shooters. ABC News crime and terrorism analyst and retired FBI agent Brad Garrett says that is not uncommon.
Many of them, if they're younger, like this particular shooter, she may well have told other people. There may be messages and or information online that may not be as direct as I'm going to go shoot up my school to that I feel like I'm going to go do something violent.
A post on X from an account believed to be used by her shows a photo of the OK symbol and then a locked Google Doc file posted 7 minutes before the shooting. Authorities are also trying to figure out the authenticity of a document believed to be a manifesto circulating online. A previous post on the X account also shows video of an attack in Sweden from 2015, posted 10 days before the shooting. Wisconsin Attorney General Josh Kaul says there are almost always signs ahead of time.
It's rare that it's a situation where somebody all of a sudden wakes up one day and decides to commit violence. Instead, there's a series of things that may lead to it.
And James, we know her parents are cooperating with the investigation.
They are. She lived with dad but visited mom in Janesville, according to those court filings, though it's still unclear where the gun that she used came from in that shooting. We're working with Madison Police to get that information tonight.
All right, James Stratton reporting live in the newsroom. Thank you.
Stunning new developments, a local tie here in San Diego County to the deadly school shooting in Madison, Wisconsin this week.
Federal agents detained a 20-year-old Carlsbad man. They say he was communicating with the Wisconsin teen who killed 2 people before turning the gun on herself on Monday. NBC7's Shelby Bremer joins us now from Carlsbad with the latest. Shelby.
Yeah, Catherine and Mark, this is the neighborhood where Alexander Pfaffendorf lives. He's not been charged with any crime, but court records show that FBI agents and Carlsbad police came here Tuesday after allegedly discovering that he had been exchanging messages with that Madison shooter. Now, neighbors tell us that they're shocked by this news, but not surprised.
20-year-old Alexander Pfaffendorf of Carlsbad is now at the center of a federal investigation into a deadly school shooting 2,000 miles away. This gun violence emergency protective order, issued by a judge Tuesday, shows FBI agents detained Pfaffendorf after he was, quote, discovered plotting a mass shooting with the Madison, Wisconsin shooter Natalie Rupnow. Police say Rupnow opened fire at Abundant Life Christian School on Monday, killing a teacher and a fellow student, wounding 6 others before killing herself. The order requiring Pfaffendorf to surrender any weapons says agents saw messages he had exchanged with Rupnow. Pfaffendorf, quote, admitted to the FBI agents that he told Rupnow that he would arm himself with explosives and a gun and that he would target a government building, the order says. Pfaffendorf has not been charged with any crime. The FBI, the Department of Justice, and Carlsbad police all declined to comment.
I was shocked, but not shocked.
This neighbor, who asked not to be identified, said Pfaffendorf lived with his father and described him as reclusive.
Wore a hood all the time, never looked up, never no eye contact ever in all the years I've lived here.
He said the community had speculated before.
Well, it didn't surprise me. There were conversations along the way, nothing that was direct, just, wow, the way he acts, he could end up doing something stupid.
Another neighbor said he saw more than a dozen agents and officers descend on the home Tuesday.
A couple hours into it, towards the end, they're carrying out a big black box. Looked like a gun case of some sort.
He, too, said Pfaffendorf kept to himself and hasn't been spotted here since.
I've only seen him a few times. He's real quiet. Just seen him walk to his car and back, said hello. That's about it.
The district attorney's office tells us they're not involved in any case that involves Pfaffendorf. That protective order is held until Monday, and there's a hearing on that January 3rd. Reporting live in Carlsbad, Shelby Bremer, NBC7.
Thank you, Shelby.
Context of White Supremacy. Happy Solstice Day. Gus T., worthless Negro from Virginia, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. That would be information for non-white people, victims of white supremacy. Today's date, Saturday, November 21, solstice 2024. So I have been told. Not for spectators. Let us know how you're navigating the holidays, so-called. If you have children especially, figured out any codes to successfully explain, detail all the racism and all this, especially younger children, I reckon. Or if you have maybe older victims and they have years of dedicated time with eggnog and mistletoe and Christmas tree and lights and Frosty the Snowman and all the rest of it, it can be very challenging to disrupt those behavior patterns. Let us know if you've figured anything out. The number 605-313-5164. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Like we've heard a bunch of white school shootings at this point. I don't think I've ever heard or remember a school shooting where they went and talked to some of the neighbors, relatives, friends, whatever, of the white shooter, and they said, oh, I was surprised, but not surprised. Like, what? Like, I thought he might do something crazy. What? Crazy. This was a she, pardon me. She might do so. Oh, sorry, I'm talking about the right one. He might do something crazy. What? Man. Imagine if that was Leroy. Imagine if that was Leroy. Anyway, I do want to take one moment, give out the number again, we'll go over the clips, but man, the Catherine Massey Book Club. Reading is more important than watching TV, even documentaries. Please do not ever call into the cows to discuss television, what you watched on TV. I just don't care. I do not care. Like, never, 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 I'm never interested in talking to a black person about what they watched on television. Like, never, never. What they saw at the movies, Netflix, YouTube, none of it. Documentaries, none of it. Even if it's a documentary about me, I don't care. I don't care. I do not care, ever. Reading is more important than watching TV. Just the power of the book club. And the past week, the number of Cows listeners that I had that contacted me specifically saying, oh man, that white urchin shot up all them people in Wisconsin, close to Dahmerland, shot up all them people, had on the KMFDM shirt. What? And they had the links and evidence and all the rest of it. Oh, man. How do they even know why that is significant? The Catherine Massey Book Club. And I would have to say, as someone who has seen more than a dozen documentaries on Columbine, I'm not sure very many documentaries, most of them, they kind of gloss over. They'll just say indie rock bands. Most of them don't go into any real detail about KMFDM or Rammstein. None of that. Like, you would have to watch a bunch to actually get the bands named. And it, like, even Bowling for Columbine, take the one that most people have seen. They focus on Marilyn Manson. They don't really say anything about Rammstein. They're not named. KMFDM, they're not named. It's all that time on Marilyn Manson. Anyway, we read in depth about Columbine, and we heard, played. I didn't even play KMFDM today, although I could have. I played Rammstein because I think we played a disproportionate amount of Rammstein tracks. But either way, German industrial rock band. We heard all that. With Columbine, research and studying real aspects of white supremacy, racism. I hope that will help us become better counter-racist scientists, where we are more knowledgeable, have a much more in-depth knowledge about what it means to be white and how white supremacy racism operates. I said that just with the book club alone. I said that so many times, just different things that we've been reading about and got more details, and then it became far more relevant as things continued. The school shooters. Wow. Well, shame on us for not having studied Columbine much earlier, seeing how relevant all that is all these years later. This little coward, she was 15, wasn't even born when the Columbine shooting happened. But worship, old deal. Red, want to dread. We've heard numbers, gangs of folks, a little coward down in Tennessee who did the shooting last year. Same thing. I want to dress just like old Reb. deal. Get out. And they did the same nonsense. Look at that. They would wonder, was she bullied? Talking about the little 15-year-old in Wisconsin. Was she bullied? Was she picked on? School year is about to end, man. What do you mean? But go home. Get some eggnog. Play some video games. You got at least 2 weeks if you were bullied. You ain't going to see these clowns for a good 2 weeks. Probably be next year sometime. You might even have 3 weeks off, man. What? Nah. I got to shoot up the school. Got to be like Reb. Come on. Let's see. Catherine Massey, Joey 22 caliber killings with Buffalo. That trial is coming up next year. I cannot wait. Trials are important. Yes. Trials are important. But that's next year. Old Peyton Gendron, and certainly Jonestown. Oh, I could talk about that for eons. Anywho, matter of fact, talk about it now. Continues to be the greatest travel experience of Gus T's life, time on the planet. I have to say again, I've left the country, like, repeatedly. Gone to Hawaii. Gone to Jamaica, islands, really nice, beaches, warm weather. Going to kick it in California for over a month, easily. Best travel experience of my life. And again, I didn't even want to go because I knew it would be stressful. It is very difficult. Victim of white supremacy, privileged, black male, worthless, Negro from Virginia, Gus T. It is extremely difficult for me to do anything. Go to the grocery store. I might be accused. Matter of fact, I even said, evidence. What do you mean? It is extremely difficult for me to do anything. Went to the dentist yesterday. It was awful. I just had a checkup. It was awful. Racism too. It was awful. Gone to the doctor. I've talked about that before. Awful. Had the police called on me for brushing my teeth in the proximity of my residence. Remember, I talked about that when Dr. Curry came to talk with us about the man knot. I went to the grocery store, Trader Joe, Capitol Hill. I'm talking to a Trader Joe employee. Pleasant, not trying to rob her or figuring out a scheme to rape her once she gets off from work. We're talking pleasant. I'm going to go about my shopping. I leave her presence. I walk down the aisle. Roughly, maybe 2 minutes passes. She comes back snickering. I'm like, what's so funny? And she says, Gus, look here. A black customer just came up to report on you. They said, excuse me, ma'am, you better watch him. He's picking up items. He's not even putting them back where they got. Watch him. Watch him. I said, is that a crime? Like if you pick up a jar of spinach or chickpeas, Brussels sprouts at the grocery store, and then if you change your mind, let's say you picked up the chickpeas on aisle 7, and then you get to aisle 12 and say, on second thought, yeah, I'm not gonna do the chickpeas. I'm gonna pick something else today. You put them back. Is that up? You being a shiftless nigga. You go back. You put that back on aisle 8. I didn't even know that was a crime, much less you sniff like that's the crime, like up. That he's trying to do something. He's up to no good. And she thought this was so funny. Like, what in the world? I could give you a number of instances just from the grocery store, but it is really difficult. You all have heard me. I don't have a great personality. I said with Carlsbad Courthouse, he was telling us about his white coworker. I said, they talk same way about me, where they say that Gus is unprofessional. He doesn't know how to talk to people. Z's mommy told us yesterday, said one of her white coworkers, they said, this fella, he's stubborn. He's difficult to get along with. I said, that's what they say about me. I will, what did I say? Worthless Negro from Virginia. So as someone who does not make friends, try to stay away from people, white people, non-white people, everybody, really. Ugh. I do not make friends. People do not enjoy my company. It is very difficult for me to do anything. I did not relish the thought of being away from my residence for over 30 days, and for a portion of that being about 1,000 miles away from my residence. Even being a block away is kind of oof, oof. But wow, thankfully got back safely. I reckon unless they slip the Mickey or something on me, they won't activate until a month or so later. But thankfully got back, and then just got whales of information. I was even processing, like, if I actually had like paper documents, books and papers, and maybe, I don't know, a DVD or something for video, right? As opposed to having everything digital, and just the mountains and boxes of material that would equate to. I mean, it boggles the mind. I told you before, like, I thought way back when I had lots of Jonestown material when I had about 2,000, 3,000 files. Now I told you I have to measure by gigabytes. That was before I got the videos. That was before I got the videos. Now with the videos, well, can you estimate, like, how much material did you get in California? It might be 50 gigs. That is, I don't even know how to equate that and with a chunk of that, like at least I'd say half of that is just written documents, books, newspaper articles, written documents, handwritten, some of it. I would approximate 50 gigs in total. It is a staggering amount of material. And it paid so well, I didn't even get all my material from the San Francisco Public Library, which also had droves of information. I mean, wow, white people can stockpile. Droves they had. I didn't even get it all. I'm still waiting. And I'm so glad the decision I made with time and energy, when presented with thousands, I employed the same strategy, same code across all mediums. You don't have time to read this much material at the moment. You don't have time to listen to this much material at the moment. You don't have time to view. I didn't watch any of the documentaries or anything at that time. It was just take. We'll have to watch all this later because the volume was so massive. It was just all the time will have to be about document and material acquisition, and then we can peruse at your really once you get back to Seattle. Great plan, especially because I kind of implemented that at the beginning when I did not know, oh, you could just digitize all the video and audio stuff. Oh, how easy. Whew. Great. And I would tell folks, man, pick something to research, anything. Lynching, it's got to be something related to white supremacy, racism. Go to your library and investigate. Explore. If you have children, should be mandatory. If they have pictures, video, audio, a lot of that material can be digitized, and much of it for free, even at the public library. You should go, and it should be counter-racist duty, because for some of this material, they told me directly, and they said the same thing at multiple institutions. You can get this material digitized for free, and once they digitize the material, like if it's an old VHS or an old audio cassette, some of which they would prefer to digitize because it's so old, it's, it was not designed to last forever, so it's going to break eventually. They would prefer to go ahead and digitize. That way they can have it for a longer period of time, and, and that way people can use the digital version, as opposed to they got to go set you up at a audio cassette player or VHS, VCR type of a thing, antiquated products. So if you request others will benefit, then in the future, when they come to the library, they can just get the link and, oh, wow, great, way easier. They might even just be able to listen online as opposed to even having to go to the library. Even better. So make that a part of your counter-racist duty. Now, the payoff continues. I even compensated. I wish I'd had more time because I would have got even more material at UCLA. Dr. Jolyon Lewis West. I mentioned his name before. Lewis Jolyon West, that's it. I mentioned his name before. This dude was on the Kerner Commission, unless I've been misinformed. You've heard Fuller talk about that repeatedly over the years, right? This powerful white man, professor at UCLA, this dude of the thinking, hey, we got to do something about these rioting, replace racism. No, not that. We need to get a pill. Something to take the edge off of the drapetomania, so our niggers will be better behaved. You got somebody? Can we get a pill? You think? This dude that they got records saying, I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he said. They got records of him having discussions with other powerful white people, professors and politicians, saying exactly that. What are we going to do about our Negro problem? Is there a pharmaceutical solution? This dude, massive files on the zebra murders. Didn't even happen in LA where he was, but he got files on it. Massive files on Jonestown. Audio included. Even though I'm not in LA, Gus T made his pre-holiday submission, said, hey, it seems like this audio stuff, you can get that. You don't even have to go to the library because they're not going to give it to you anyway. They're just going to digitize. Why can't you do that from Seattle? You can. This, I can't even go into the detail, man. How does this white dude that I keep bringing that out. Dr. Welsing talked about Jonestown. It's important. She was a general and child psychiatrist. She didn't get to talk to Jonestown survivors. She didn't get to interview them about their trauma. Some of them were children. She didn't get to do that. Dr. Lewis Jolyon West did. Dr. Phil Zimbardo did. And other white doctors. Some of them got to talk to these non-white people repeatedly and for years. What they call it, follow-up studies. Ask more questions. Video record all this. I don't even know if Dr. Welsing knew about, all the, man. Whew, failure. We will compensate as best we can. So anyway, backdrop, all of that, so much information I'm still trying to process and gather. And I got information on Patrice Lumumba, Andre Bloom. We just finished that too, right? My cups overfloweth, really. Within all that, I went to the ceremony. That was the whole reason to go. November 18th, the ceremony at Evergreen Cemetery in Oakland. At that ceremony, organized by Dr. Norwood, at that ceremony, Dr. Amos Brown spoke. He joined us via phone. He was not feeling his best. He is 83 years young, but still healthy, vital, moving around, to replace white supremacy with justice. Now, Dr. Amos Brown called in, talked about his experiences with Jim Jones, the People's Temple, why it was important to remember all of this. So I said, I'll make an effort. He lives in San Francisco. I said, I'll make an effort to chat it up with him. Now, I wanted to talk to him while I was still there, but he wasn't feeling well, so I didn't want to, tax him while he's trying to recover and get his vitality back. So I said, I'll just, wait and call him later. Plus, I had lots of other things to do while I was there, so no harm. So I call him this week, find his number, give him a ring. Whoopee. Start talking, and, he is excited to talk about Jonestown. So we chat for about an hour. I'm so grateful. I'm going to see if we can get him to come be a guest on the program, talk about some of his experiences. He talks about he was in San Francisco. He was there when Jim Jones first moved down from Ukiah to San Francisco, and he was suspicious of Jim Jones. He said, I don't know, something seems not right about this dude. He said he had studied cults when he was in school, went to an HBCU, and he said, I don't know, I'm not, this dude is suspicious, and I'm not with the Jim Jones. So he says the other black people, they welcome him in, and he's a black minister specifically welcomes him in and helps him get a set up. Jim Jones turns on this black minister eventually. And so Dr. Amos Brown, he's going into detail about how Jim Jones, the takeover of the local NAACP, and then his efforts to do the same of other organizations. Woo! Not that I didn't know this information. I had a total flashback. Drapetomania, that's her title, not the actual disease, although she suffers from that too. But she was with us on the book club. This was all talked about in Was Jonestown a CIA medical experiment? Jim Jones' efforts to bogart the local NAACP chapters, get his members of the People's Temple in these different groups, then they can steal more black members and they can dominate and control what the NAACP branch is going to do. We fussed and griped, Drapetomania and I, why didn't Michael Mayers, why didn't he put a footnote? What does he talk? Where's the evidence to support all this? And boom, 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 boom. And then I went and I stopped and I said, whoa, this is back when I thought I was tough. I had like 2,000 files. I said, let me do a search through my files and see where does NAACP popped up. And I told you all, it popped up like dozens of times. And I just started reading reports. I had one from the 1950s when he was still in Indiana where it said Jim Jones was a life member of the NAACP. Life. I didn't even hear Fuller say he had a life membership to the NAACP. And then it just went on from there. The book Raven, it goes into great detail talking about his efforts to take over the NAACP, where they had to change the rules to try to stop him from doing all this, and it's cited in a number of other articles. So I said, oh, okay, he didn't need to say it's oversight. It's widely sourced, his efforts in the NAACP. Now, as I'm talking to Dr. Brown, I'm still appreciate just to get corroboration from someone who was there and saw this, and apparently Jim Jones tried to do this with other black organizations. No big surprise, that's what he does. And so it was almost like, are you surprised to hear that? And I appreciate it, but no, like that's, was Jonestown a CIA medical experience, 600-page book, very detailed. So he goes on to give other examples. He talks about exactly where he was on the planet when he heard about Guyana. I think he said a white woman kind of walked by. He was out to dinner and a white woman walked by their table and said, oh, it was a tragedy. They killed all those people down in Guyana. He said, that's Jim Jones. He said, I knew it immediately. I didn't have to hear anything else. Just that little bit. I said, Jim Jones killed all those people. And then they got the Anyway, I'm talking to Dr. Brown. Amazing. Like I said, I'm see if we can get him on the program and all that. He continued to emphasize Jim Jones took all that money and property from black people. He said that over and over, millions of dollars. I said when I was there, in some circles, the People's Temple, where that church was located on Geary Boulevard at the time, that would be considered beachfront property. Not that you can see the beach from there, but it's literally 10 minutes from the shore. You could probably, I didn't do it, but I mean, it's straight line not no curves in it. It's 10 minutes straight line to the coast. It would be considered beachfront property in some places. Like it is such a central area. That was the black hub, the Fillmore at the time. Like all of that property would be worth so much money now. The properties in Ukiah that he got from black people worth so much money now. The properties in Oakland. It was black people that I was talking to while I was there, and they said the same thing. Like, I drive past some of those neighborhoods. These are $1 million properties now. California, Bay Area, Silicon Valley, Steph Curry. Jim Jones took all of that. Businesses, some of that too. Anyway, he kept emphasizing how much looting of black people Jim Jones did. What did I say? You got to shoot your Steph Curry shot metaphor. The question for Jonestown is, given all that, do you think Jim Jones was racist? Exact same answer everyone else has had immediately. No way, Gus T. And he immediately pivoted back to, man, he was targeting all them black people and taking their property and taking their money and victims guaranteed qualified. I said, man, I bet you could do a counter-racist experiment. Ask non-white people, black people, list, and I mean by name, white people that you think are so-called allies. I don't use that term, but these are white people that are not racist. They are doing as much as they can to fight against racism. You think. These are white people that are in the fight, they're in the struggle, they're on our side. If we just had a few more white people like this, we could solve this problem. Give us by name. I bet you they could get some folks on that list. Timothy Wise, Jane Elliott, and Brother John Brown. I know he's dead, but his spirit is still with us. We miss you, Brother John. So, okay, we write him down. Okay. Now, can you name white people that you think are racist? I think you might get Donald Trump. I think for most non-white people, a white person that you think is racist, Jim Jones, remember they did that with Dylan Storm Roof. They went to some of his black friends and said, racist? We kicked it and what do you mean? Racist? Racist? I would be very curious to see those lists. I think the first list, these are the cool white people. I think that list is going to be bigger than these are the white people that I think are racist. Maybe you get Donald Trump's name on that. Maybe. I don't know what it. And like I said, other than Dr. Norwood and white people, other than Dr. Norwood and white people, I don't know anybody that thinks Jim Jones is a racist. Any hoodles. Interestingly, I didn't hear Dr. Brown emphasize the drug component, which I've also noted is a pattern. I don't know. That would be one I would lead with. If all this is going to end with us making Kool-Aid jokes about black people, I would have to emphasize that, hey, Jim Jones was drugging the black people apparently before they even left California. But apparently people are not well informed about that component. Anyway, everybody should study Jonestown. Everybody. They had that in the L.A. Sentinel. I got that black newspaper in L.A. I got that while I was down there. And they had that on the front page. Black people should study Jonestown. Yes. Yes, we should. I've even heard more Kool-Aid jokes since I got back. Embarrassing. Pains my... I heard one of the victims, she said she was on her job and a white woman came on there snickering, talking about they done drank the Kool-Aid and picked that Trump again. Drank it all down, they did. And she said, plus it's November, so this is right, that time of year. And she said she had a calm conversation with her and said, I lost family members. They did not drink the Kool-Aid. Some of them were killed and injected. She said that white woman gets nervous around her now. Every time she sees, she real careful about what she says. We ain't got no more. Cut all of that out. Any hoodles. The caller asked, since I did get into all of that, and the caller asked, so what is so special about Stanford? This came up yesterday. It would be difficult to put into words. What is so special about Stanford in terms of the power of this institution in the system of white supremacy racism? And again, for counter-racist scientists, Dr. William Shockley, immediately. Dr. Welsing's nemesis, you should think of that immediately. Eugenics University, you should think of that immediately. Maybe Palo Alto, Malcolm Harris's book should be required reading to explain all that, the history of Eugenics University, Stanford, Palo Alto, and how that fits in the global system of white supremacy racism, Silicon Valley included. Stanford, so powerful Stanford alumni. Dr. Condoleezza Rice, remember her? We did a lot of name calling of her, I know. Senator Cory Booker might be president at some point. John F. Kennedy. Sigourney Weaver. Rishi Sunak, former prime minister in the UK. Elon Musk just got his cabinet position. Phil Knight. Wouldn't even know Mike Jordan's name if it wasn't for Phil Knight. And the list just goes on. Matter of fact, Tiger Woo. Cablinasian got his start at Palo Alto. I think that's well documented too. His Stanford days, they might have whole documentaries about his times with the Cardinal. All of that said, this institution of eugenics and white supremacy, and designed to be all of that, state of California, they did all those forced sterilizations. We just talked about that last week. Oh, wait a minute, I was doing famous alumni. Can I get one more? Luigi Mangione. We still celebrating him, right? Gunned down that CEO man. Now, he didn't go to school at Stanford, but he was employed there. Maybe where I said that immediately, might be where he learned some of his stealth, homicidal code. Any hoodles. But Stanford, even the place that I attended, I told you all when I got back, when I went to Stanford, I think I got government ID. Like issued new. I got it in my wallet. I'm going to have to use it the next time, I go someplace just to see, can you use it? It's got a picture on it. Hoover Institute. I mean, this is a Stanford University. That's a government. That's not even a public institution. I think that's a government ID. I'm going to have to try. But I mean, I haven't even been to a library. Like, I know you can go to the library and get a library card, and it might have your picture on it. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But it is mandatory to enter the facility, not to check out, just to step footsies in the facility. You have to be issued picture government identification and have valid government ID already. Man, for the Hoover Institute, in fact, I've had to go back and look at Malcolm Harris's book, Palo Alto, because he talks about the Hoover Institute. That's where I was. He talks about that specifically. Founded to house Hoover's accumulated, this is Herbert Hoover, former president of the United States, historical records in the wake of World War I. The Hoover Institution moved in the early 40s into a tan priapism of Hoover Tower, where its mission expanded from securing a Hooverian understanding of the past to promoting a Hooverian vision of the future. As the Chiefs, removed from the national mainstream, deepened during FDR's World War II heyday, he pushed his institution further to the right, building a watchtower for the anti-communist international in his Palo Alto backyard. And they literally do have a massive tower at the Hoover Institute that looks out over the entire landscape. This is about 30 years, or I think Dr. Shockley was already there at this because he was there for decades. Decades. This was just decades before he got to debating Dr. Welsing, but this went on for decades, all that. And he goes on to talk about how Ronald Reagan, governor in California, then eventual president, he had his whole Hoover cabinet, all these really smart, powerful white people helped guide foreign policy. Probably the people who helped to bring you Silicon Valley, like Dr. William Shockley. Extraordinary power nexus, at least of this part of the world, maybe globally. That's why I said they have so much material. I was flabbergasted, the volume of material that they have on that campus about Jonestown, Patrice Lumumba. But they had whole files on Andre Bloom, other side of the world. And they make massive files, boxes. And then Jonestown, like I said, and I got all the Jonestown material. They had gobs of it efficiently. Go through and digitize all that. I guess that means they got budget. I don't think I could have done all that if I had gone to Morehouse, we'll say. Grambling, we'll say. I'm not disparaging them, but white people have deliberately looted these so-called black institutions named after white slave owners mostly for decades. That's a matter of public record. They're not going to have the same finances to be able to go and digitize. Oh, you want digitized 20 3-hour documentaries? And so, oh, no problem, Negro, we'll you're not even a student here? No problem. We'll knock all that out and get it to you for free in a couple of weeks. Now, maybe they could, but I doubt it. Stanford's not even a public institution. They got budget to crank all that out. He's like I said, I'm going to be greedy, see if I get the rest of it. And they got my slide. I keep saying that. They taught Jonestown at Stanford, at least Phil Zimbardo did. They taught Jonestown Negro prisoners in conjunction with Nazi Germany. And got slides that say that. Black prisoners at Jonestown. And then follow that with slides of Nazi Germany. That's at Stanford. While we make Kool-Aid jokes. Any hoodles, if I can rewind 1 second, it was an important moment. There were many, but when I spoke with Dr. Brown, and I asked him, I said, man, are you aware, like they got like boxes, whole file cabinets and things of material on Jonestown right down the street at Berkeley and Stanford, like some of these white professors and doctors, like they talked to some of the survivors for years and recorded and all that. And he said no. And he said those people, they wouldn't talk to me because I know too much. Victims guaranteed qualified. I'm certainly not disparaging Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown, pardon. 83 years old. I probably won't even live that long. Worthless Negro from Virginia. Amazing job and did a lot of time fighting against racism, white supremacy in his 83 years. Remarkable dude. And he sniffed out Jim Jones immediately. So, I mean, hey, kudos to him. But I have heard and seen that attitude from non-white people before, thinking that we know something more than white people. We're more informed than they. That is dangerous. And I just think logically, it is not true. And I just said, even the NAACP portion in terms of Jim Jones' efforts to subvert whatever that organization was doing, that's in books written by white people. Plural. Books written by white people. That would be one right there. Now, how many black people have written a book about white people subverting the NAACP where it includes Jim Jones? Who's more informed about white supremacy, racism? That's what I mean. Like, dangerous. It's just like, man, all of the things that you said, they're in the books that white people have written, and they add the drugs, and they add the Brazil component, and the South America component, and the CIA component. That's not to get to, hey, was this a drug experiment? Why does Jolly West, Dr. Lewis Jolly in West, why does he have all these files after he was just on the Kerner Commission? Why did Dr. Zimbardo do all this investigating of Jonestown, and for years. That's what I mean. Like, I think that is such a dangerous, I just think it's flawed and inaccurate. But thinking, even if we're super in for, like, now I do have a lot of Jonestown files and lots that most people do not have. But man, they said there were thousands of documents, never were publicized. Matter of fact, they told me at Stanford, like, look here, Brother Gus, some of this material is not publicly available at the moment. Sorry. So yeah, I do have like massive, even my DVD, or excuse me, documentary collection at this point is, wow, impressive. It's not better than white people's. My audio collection at this point, very impressive. It's not better than white people's. Anywho, the experts remain racist man, racist woman, racist child. Many of them at Stanford. Left such an impression. I'm so glad I went there too. Not that Berkeley was a slouch. I got a lot of information there too, and they had a lot of same thing files too. But woo, Berkeley is no Stanford. Berkeley is public. Stanford is not. Let's see. Go Bears. Go Bears. Let's see. For the notes that we heard specifically, Walter Rodney went to Stanford. I forgot about that. Walter Rodney, when he came here, he talked at Stanford. Dr. Phil Zimbardo was at that talk, and he took notes. I photocopied the notes too, but that's Dr. Phil Zimbardo was there, and he took notes at Stanford. It was organized for, I think, like, whatever you call, like, the Black Student Union. Like, was Dr. Zimbardo an invited guest? Who's ignorant about white supremacy racism again? Right. Let's see. Notes from what we heard. I already mentioned the Columbine folks, Wisconsin, or one was in California and then one Wisconsin. I did see them try to emphasize this week that, oh man, this shooting is so different because it's a female. No, it's not. No, it's not. It is exactly the same. It is the usual suspects, white people. I mentioned the shooting that was in Tennessee last year. We talked about that with Michael Scholes just a few weeks ago. He was surprised because they mentioned she, transgender, whatever, mentioned Columbine too. Doesn't everyone? That was someone born a female, and then they said they're transgender. Whatever. The commonality that they always ignore, someone classified as white, I'm going to go shoot up the school and do it in honor of Columbine. Not that they were bullied, not that they were teased, not that their parents were divorced. What does it mean to be white? Great equalizer. That's what to do. Let's see. We heard the segment on Roger Golubsky. I just want to say quickly that words are very important. I was so glad we got to hear from some of the many, many victims in the Kansas City, Kansas area. Black people who were terrorized for decades by Golubsky and these other racist race soldiers, really. But the terms that were used to describe some of them, gremlins, boogeymen, bad actors. I just posted about that lame. I mean, you want to talk about bad actors. I just posted about that as a Christmas movie that white people, they kill for fun so frequently. It is appalling the number of movies that are allegedly Christmas films that are just about white people killing. Die Hard and Lethal Weapon. Mel Gibson saying now, he said, hey, this is the only thing I was good at. Danny Glover said, what you mean? That's Mr. Z in Color Purple. That's a Christmas movie too, remember? Anyway, Danny Glover said, what you mean? And Mel Gibson said, hey, it's the only thing I was good at, man. 1,500 yards, it'd be windy day and raining, and pow, I lay him down, boy. Only thing I was ever good with. Merry Christmas, black brother. Merry Christmas. That's Christmas. That's Christmas. Killing. Die Hard, and they just crank these out. You got tons of them. Just goes on for years. That's what we're going to do. I didn't even mention, they released like Django on Christmas Day and Chris Kyle, American Sniper. I didn't even mention all that. I'm just talking about these are ostensibly Christmas films that are just about killing, like Gremlins. Now, Gremlins, you got these little critters. They're supposed to be pets, and they're cute. That's not Roger Galupski. Even once you feed them after night and they get dark and niggerish and want to rape and loot all the white people, that's not Roger Galupski. Can we just call him a suspected racist? Can we call him a suspected race soldier? Not the boogeyman, not a gremlin. Rapist, racist. Again, we don't identify white people as racist. Even suspected racist, great. Suspected rapist, great. That's better. That's more accurate, and I think much better in terms of discourse than gremlins, cartoon figures, bad actors. Are we talking about Charlize Theron? Or are we talking about a racist? Let's see. Getting rid of red, number 3, and all those food colorings. We talked about that with Dr. Ruby Lathan, Dr. Kamal Kamban. I think Judith Finlayson, she's not a doctor, Judith Finlayson, we've talked about that in a number of times and ways. That is a big component frequently that I leave out, all those goofy food colorings. I was just talking about this time of year, red velvet cake, one of the favorites. I used to have that all the time in my family. That's one right there. Now, I don't know if that is the red number 5 or number 3 or whatever, but they put all that goofy food coloring in it. And I was just talking to different victims. She was saying, man, that gives me a headache and everything. Exactly what they were saying. I feel that all in my neurons and firing in my system and got me feeling all twitchy and I don't do the red velvet. Like, man, I don't blame them. But I'm not accustomed to eating because all the stuff that they mentioned, the chips and the candies and the sodas, I don't consume any of that. That's the sort of thing generally that they would brag about not having any of those products. I made red velvet cake since being plant-based. I made it, I don't know, it was a few years back, but I got the pictures online. Immaculate. Color was great. Texture was great. Icing was superb. I didn't use no food coloring in there. You can get, whatever type of color they're trying to get, you can get. They said that in the report. When I make nacho cheese, I put that in my Vitamix. You want the coloring so it's still yellow, right? Add a little bit of turmeric. They said that in the report. You will get, bang, it will be the exact same color. It will not impact the flavoring. Nacho cheese, let's roll. And nothing that's going to have me all, whoa, my brain ain't where you slip some neurotoxin in the cheese. What? In the name of color? Red velvet cake. Beets are so powerful. Anybody, if you get raw beets, they'll stain your whole counter. All it takes is a little bit. They have beetroot powder. All it takes is a dab. Red. There you go. If you use more than a dab, you might stain the whole counter. Will not impact the taste at all. It's no reason to have all these chemicals, poisons really, in the food. Why? Even if it's a hint, and particularly they said in California that they got these differences, noted the impact for children. Children are much more sensitive to all those chemicals and what anybody, if you have children, if you talk to the doctor, they'll tell you this. Probably have already told you this. That's why they have special soap, shampoo, laundry detergent for children because they're very sensitive. Dump all these chemicals and dump all those chemicals on them at an early age so they can be all addicted and what have you. I've been eating red dye number 5 all my life. No, man, you are what your grandparents ate. If you eat more fruits, veggies, you will not have to worry about red number 5 and all those other chemical concoctions, high fructose corn syrup that they slip in your food and beverages. Candy canes and all that nonsense this time of year. Any hoodles. Kalea Turner, that'll be the last one. Then we get to some of the folks who dialed in. 12-year-old black female who attempts suicide, according to her mother. after being teased and bullied at school. They were calling her Roach. Man. She's 12-year-old female. I've said for years, Dr. Welsing has said, you play around with sex. Kalea Turner. And really not having in-depth discussion before that child gets here. Now, are we really just going to send our child to the same school that we went to? Maybe Kalea Turner's parents did that. Could be. Race soldiers can totally ruin our best plans easily. Happens all the time. Me too. Generally, it has been my experience. We do not do that. Let's have extensive conversation. What are we going to do about our child's academic plan? Are we just going to send them to the same school, racist school system that we attended? Really? Just say, hey man, we work, we got jobs and everything, and we just don't have time. We couldn't homeschool, and racist school. That's the best we could do, little dude. That's the best we could do, man. Sorry. Okay, I mean, if that is the answer, legitimate, we don't have time, or I don't feel comfortable teaching, or, whatever. Okay. Hey, the man, fella at the end, he was talking about the Columbine. She said, I was surprised. Not that surprised. I had to play that report about Kalea Turner because we had non-white person, they dialed in to share. They gave a follow-up because they had a little non-white child who had been crying and talking about being teased at school. They said that little white student was using bathroom words. That was the language that the child used to describe all this. And this is a 4-year-old little black girl. Said they're using bathroom words, and so she reported this to the teacher, her mom. This is like not even kindergarten forward. That's like preschool, right? Right? Am I being ignorant? I don't think they let you in kindergarten at 4. I don't have children, so. And she said they reported all this and blah, blah, blah. Said the investigator contacted her sister, this is her niece, contacted her sister who contacted her to find out what are the other exchanges my niece has experienced with this little boy. Said the investigator ruled that it was unfounded for a child to cry and pitch a fit to keep from going to school. Unfounded. The tears the office worker saw when I walked her into the office to talk to the principal at the start of school, unfounded for a child to share that what he does to her every day, such as call her names and pull her hair, unfounded. My niece is not the first incident of a black student being bullied in this school district. Oh, this is the same school district as Kayla Turner. I thought, there was some distance, but this is the same school district. Man. Man, there would have to be lots of conversations prior to, and we're only halfway through the school year, and I don't know what it looks like for K through 12, but for preschool, but wow, even if they got a winter break, like that is a long time to have to go through May, June. If you have staff that's unresponsive and this little terrorist is, hey, I know I can get away with anything. I'll be calling y'all all kinds of names and feces and blah, 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 and all the rest of it. Man, that is not anything to play with. Even, beyond the mental health impact and, how bad things can get, I don't want to go to school. That can have devastating That's how you end up with lots of people who don't want to read. Don't want to use their brain computer, don't want to do any research. That in fact, I asked Dr. Brown, he said, that's how you end up with so many people who don't know anything about Jonestown. Yup. Terrorized at school. I didn't learn how to read as well. My reading comprehension isn't so great. And I just had a bad experience there in the libraries and all that kind of weirds me out. So no, I don't want to do any of that. Starting at 4. We ain't even talking about 12, 4. replace white supremacy with justice. If we have attempted parents, if you have any suggestions other than, I think there would have to be a lot more honest conversations about, are we going to continue to send our children to school? And I mean, really, I'm intimidated about taking my child to school. I don't have time to do homeschooling. I don't feel comfortable or competent to do homeschooling. I don't know enough about a subject matter or whatever. The host of excuses are that the best or only solution is we got to send them to racist man, racist woman to be educated. Hey, you don't have to have the children. That might be a better option than Kalea Turner. I'm just saying. We've been looking at this for a long time and grousing about lack of, children or lack of adequate teachers and school situation and all of that. Hey, if we're not going to do some investigating and maybe we can find if they got independent black schools or what the schools look like in our area before we get to the bedroom, hey, maybe we don't need to do all this. It needs to be a totally different way about thinking about having black children because it is really serious. Dangerous, I would say. The whole childbirth, we got all that. Serena Williams almost died and everything. It is dangerous through and through, even after they get here, even more dangerous. Red number 5 waiting on them, racist bullies at school to call them a roach. It's dangerous. If we're not going to have a plan to deal with all of that and talking about that maybe years before we have those children, maybe we don't need to have the children. Just a suggestion. Let's see. Folks who have commentaries, certainly if you have suggestions for what to do if you have a 4-year-old in that situation, I am quiet and all ears. Metaphor. The number 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. I think it should be mandatory. If you're a attempted parent, all these school shootings, you got to explain all those. Everyone. Dangerous environment, got to be alert. Not just talking about all this for, entertainment's sake. Like, I'd pick out everyone. Look at your classmates, not to scare them to death, but this is serious. Like, man, you can't be messing around and thinking, oh, this just happened somewhere. No, this might happen here. Got to be alert, especially if you're going to send them to school. Got to be alert, especially if they're going to school with a lot of white classmates. Yes, you need to talk to them about every one of these shootings. That is the price of doing business. What business is that? Parenting in a system of white supremacy racism. Let us see. Folks who dialed in with hand up star 61, let us know what you think. Let's see.
May I be heard?
Octavius in New York. Yes, sir.
First in regards to the parenting aspect, it's extremely important to try to spend some time developing a relationship with your child where they feel comfortable about talking to you, period, in order to make sure that you get the proper information from them when they come home from school, when you ask them questions. And part of that conversation, obviously, it has to be about racism. And this is something I did personally, which is I took the time out and actually sat in the classroom while my son, was participating in everything. And I saw how he was and I saw everything. And there were these, I hate to use the term, I don't really hate to use it, but the term microaggressions did occur towards him from other white students and non-white students classified as Asian, might I add. And it was very noticeable. And I saw how he reacted. And I think he didn't know how to articulate himself. And eventually, what I ended up doing was moving him out of that school. It was no escaping it, no getting around it. Part of the reason why, as a single parent, most of the teachers there were white females. And when I spoke to another professional, I actually got and this is something else, you should get somebody that's a support, that's like a child advisor that could help you and assist you and guide you through the process when these things occur. And when I got that person, they came back to me and told me that the teachers and the people there, the administrative staff, they hate me. Basically, they had an issue with me showing up and even being in the classroom and showing support and trying to see what's going on with my son. They didn't appreciate that, and it seemed like, for whatever reason, probably because I'm a black male, and they wanted to have full control, and she informed me it's best to get him out of the school. So that was, my journey. But again, I did seek assistance. I did get a type of a person that was a guider throughout the school system and knows the ins and outs of legally what they can do and what they can't do, like a counselor almost. And it was for free by contacting and looking online actually first to see for any people that could actually do those services. They're usually nonprofits. Switching gears, going into the segments, one of the things I do notice out here was the shooting of the healthcare CEO by, the suspect, Louis Mangione. A lot of people are making commentary in regards to the way that he was brought into custody with serious armed policemen around him, along with the mayor of New York City, victim of white supremacy, Eric Adams. And I did realize that they were definitely trying to send a message, but I also thought how this worked out with Dylan Roof and how he was brought in, as opposed to this man who suspectedly only killed one person. And the charges, which is something I'm literally just now studying, which is, why is this man, Luigi Mangione, being brought up as a terrorist as opposed to Dylan Roof, who killed, if I'm correct, 9 people? I mean, logically, I'm trying to look online and trying to figure out why that case was not considered a terrorist act as opposed to this case with Luigi Mangione. But I definitely see that they are definitely sending a message by doing that, and they don't really care if he becomes some type of martyr or whatever, for whatever reason. Also, another thing is, why isn't the Ku Klux Klan considered a terrorist group as well, which is something I've also questioned. On another note, I went out with my son today. We just went out, did some activities, then we were on our way back on the train in New York City, might I add. And a non-white female became irate, started yelling, screaming, telling people on the train, if you're not from New York, if you're not from here, you need to get the hell out. I'm in charge. She was just irate and out of control verbally, and started wailing her hands and swinging her hands and trying to engage people. And the first thought that went to my head was Jordan Miller. And if this was a black male, would he be allowed to do what he's doing right now? Because it was very clear, you could smell the alcohol. This person was definitely drunk. And that's another note, by the way, is the fact that it's a non-white female, and whoever was with her, because I don't think she was drinking by herself, allowed her to get on the train and go home in that state, which I think is a poor sign on her friends and whoever associates she was hanging out with, because she definitely wasn't able to manage that. But I did think of Jordan Nelly and thought to myself, if this was a black male, what would this situation turn into, and how would it look like? What would it look like? Just a sad scenario on a lot of ends. And lastly, I practiced some self-care. I went and did an acupuncture session on Friday. And my doctor, non-white female, she'd be classified as Asian. While she's putting the needles in, starting up the session, this is the first time I've done this, by the way, she starts talking about her family and going into a story about her sister and how her sister brought a non-white male home to the Korean household, and he was Indian, classified as Indian, and he was very dark. It was darker hue, and they were all shocked and astonished, and he was just so dark that they were, thrown off by it. It was very, uncomfortable for them. And I said, why? And she said, well, back where we come from in Asia, the darker skinned people, the people of darker hue, are out working in the fields, and the lighter skinned people are in the house. And I was like, whoa. And I continued to ask some more questions. I said, so you mean to tell me your family is not familiar with a lot of dark-skinned people? She's like, oh, no, we just don't, they just don't associate with them. So I said, so you're saying your family is racist? And she goes, yes, my family is racist. Yes, they are. It's just, where they come from. And I was like, okay, you could just say it. It's not a big deal. But in the middle of having somebody put needles in my back, and I'm supposed to be a calming, therapeutic session, it just really took a minute for me to actually get back into relax mode, because one of the things that's a consistent theme that I've noticed, and this is where reading and actually being a critical thinker and analyzing while you're reading is so important, is that when you see that people are using other words and going through hoops, part of the metaphor, to try to not use the term racism and trying not to use the phrase white supremacy, it really should draw alarm. And it did draw alarm for me at that moment. But again, it was a great session still. Well, not the greatest, but it was a good session still. And I was able to get the help that I needed from the acupuncture. I will suggest it. Try to make sure you know the person and they don't have any issues. But it definitely was a therapeutic situation. With that said, I will mute my line. Thank you.
Right on for a great, or I guess constructive acupuncture session, at least better than average. When you use the term microaggression for what your son experienced, you expressed some reluctance about using the term. What did you mean when you used the term microaggressions?
Well, for me, when I use the term, it's these subtle instances, and I can give an example where he would be the first on line, and then a white child would jump in front of him and kind of look at him and just kind of give him a nasty look. And it was for no reason. There were no clear-cut things. But the teacher, when he would move in front of the child again and go like, hey, the teacher would then try to come down on him, and I would go, hey. He was there first. Child was jumping in front of him, da-da-da. It was almost like the teacher immediately leaned towards the white child, obviously because she's a white woman, before she, considered the situation and spoke to my son. And that's what I mean when I say a microaggression, but I'm hesitant to use the word because I think those slights are not really slights. I think they're bigger than what we make them out to be. And I think they all add up at the end of the day, even for a child. At the end of the day, for a long day, if that happens to you all day, it can be debilitating. That's why I'm kind of hesitant to use the word. I don't know if that really describes the scenario.
Much obliged, even though I will point out just compensatory call-in, words are important and for counter-racist logic. Now, I did ask, what did you mean with the term microaggression? And you were going to give an explanation, and then you switched to an example. That's one that I point out for folks. When you ask for terms to be explained, you should get an explanation, a definition that is not an example, because examples don't really give you a general, comprehensive understanding for, okay, this is what we mean. We've just got one specific time that might not necessarily be illustrative of all the different types of ways that this term can be used, all the different contexts that cover this term. But I'm glad that you took time with that, just because you did say you had some hesitancy about using the term, and even when you articulated, you said that you think these moments, slights, are bigger than we make them out to be, especially for a child. We weren't even talking about you being harmed. We were talking about your child, that these incidents are bigger than we make them out to be. Kalea Turner, absolutely. Even the segment that we heard about racism as a health problem, absolutely. My counter-racist code, I do not use the term microaggression just because it's in the very term micro, small, and exactly what I don't think there's anything small about an act of racism. And I think that's what these might be, acts of racism, where a white instructor does not give the same treatment to a black student that she would a white student. And I don't think white people are ignorant about racism. So, yeah, I don't think there's anything micro about any of these acts. This is how black people end up being in remedial reading, or high blood pressure, or needing Ozempic because I went to compensate to go to Dairy Queen every day because I'm sad because I had to go to school and they bullied me and called me roach and, teacher didn't do anything about it, that sort of thing. I agree. It's nothing micro about it. They don't even call them acts of aggression, of racist aggression. They put that micro on it in front. And I know white people, I think, gave us that term to further minimize the system of white supremacy racism. They don't want to say white supremacy. They want to say white privilege or microaggression or unconscious bias. They always find different ways to mitigate and euphemize. No, you all just terrorize black people all the time and do it gleefully, knowingly, willingly, and they're very resistant to calling it out as that. But bravo to being there. He said going to school and being with his child. They hated him. Ooh, I thought they would be excited. Like I normally have heard educators grouse about, oh man, we got these parents, they're just checked out, man. They just dump their children off on us and expect us to do miracles, and they don't care at all. They don't even check the homework, and you got Dad is right there. He wasn't, going outside to smoke cool cigarettes and menthols, and he was right there. He wasn't playing on the phone and yelling at his hoes. He's right there. Wow. That's all right. Leroy is all right with it. No. Ugh. What is that coon doing? Ooh. Is he going to stay all day? Ooh. Why? And they didn't just say, they know that you were here. Like, they didn't know what you were here. And did you think it was a problem or anything? Like, they were just real curious. They didn't even say that. They said, they hate your guts. That's serious. Like, what did I do with it? That would be great. No. We hate his guts. Well, yes, what I said from the beginning now, is this the best we can do? I'm an attentive, active parent, and you hate my guts? What about my child? Don't get me started on Leroy Jr. But is this the best we can do? If we can't have extensive dialogue about this, well in advance of having the children, just don't have the children. No problem. Then we don't have to have any of this and, oh, what are we going to do? And he said they call him a roach. Come on. A lot of times it's too late then. It's way too, what are you going to do? You going to take them out of school? And if you didn't think you could homeschool before, it's December now. You didn't even have a plan together. You certainly aren't going to start homeschooling now. Frequently, it's way too late by then. So, hey, if you're not going to do it the correct way and think about all of this before you get to the bedroom, no whining, regardless of whatever, no whining. This is what you signed up for because we didn't do this the correct way. Children having children, and we just signed up for the same results that we already had. Racists got us again. And the joke is on the offspring. 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. I'll say quick, he mentioned the terrorism charges for the white killer in New York, killed the CEO. I pointed out with Dylan Storm Roof in South Carolina, he didn't just kill, I think it was 9 people, if my memory serves, I think it was 9. He didn't just kill 9 people, he killed an elected state official, State Senator Clementa Pinckney. I've said for years, we should think of that as an assassination. We mentioned JFK earlier. We should think of that as assassination. We do not. I suspect a lot of us don't even remember that case. But it's not an act of terrorism. It's not a political assassination. Oh, well, that was sad. Get him a hamburger and keep moving. Wacky. That was a different state. I will say for Peyton Gendron, they did convict him of terrorism charges as well in New York State. They might bring that up, that if we want to have, local context, same jurisdiction, we did hammer Peyton Gendron with terrorism charges and bragged about doing so. First terrorism charges, I think, in New York State history, unless memory is flawed. But that did happen not too long ago. We will see about the death penalty shortly. Make all that a moot point, perhaps. But yeah, terrorism charge. They had talked about that. White life is important. These white CEOs were nervous and getting all kinds of newfangled security. Like, man, you can be gunning us down on the street. And then having white people brag and celebrate this. I posted online the second time I have seen graffiti vandalism here in the Seattle region, where white people, and it's mostly, overwhelmingly white people who live here, brag, and they'll have signs up and spray paint, deny, defend, depose. That's what one of the shell casings, what was allegedly there, and the book, close to the book title that was talking about the CEO corruption and all that, or insurance industry corruption and such. I said, man, same thing I've been saying. If, this killer accused, if he looked like Mayor Eric Adams, it would not be all of this. In Seattle or nowhere else. Yeah, Eric Adams, that's my man. We got to gripe these CEOs, these insurance companies, man. They've been leeching us dry for years, man. Get on, America. I'm with you, brother. It would not be that at all. Got some Stanford flunky out there, white dude, gonna be doing the same Columbine thing, shooting people in the back, man. How is that something to celebrate? White people kill for fun. Just like the little coward in Wisconsin, same thing. Mangione, cowardly Rupnow, that's her name, down 15 years old in Wisconsin, just like Columbine. Cowardly. I said that about white culture. Cowardly. Cheer about cowardly acts of violence. Anywho, we'll give folks about 5 minutes if they have additional thoughts, commentary to share. We should be here on Wednesday, Birth of White Jesus, the 25th. We'll share some of the audio snippets of the Welsing Dr. Shockley exchanges Gus was able to get from Stanford. Should be great to keep us focused for the day. And then we will be starting a brand new book on Thursday, Boxing Day, as it's called, some parts of the world, the 26th. Brand new book. Dr. Maya Angelou, I will add, this is our second time reading one of Dr. Angelou's works. We normally don't double dip in that manner. But The Heart of a Woman, she talks quite a bit about the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. She was upset and protested about all that. Thought that would be a great follow-up to Andre Bloom's book. And this text is also cited in the documentary Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, which should be available for viewing a wider number of audiences by now. But that'll be Thursday that we kick off. For the number of folks over the years who said that Gus T hates black females, hates females in general maybe, no count, sexist, misogynistic, black male, man, I would look at our selections for the Catherine Massey Book Club, especially my choices for the book club. We read Coretta Scott King's memoir, Assata Shakur's memoir, just finished Andre Bloom. We already read Dr. Maya Angelou once, about to do so again. One of the Little Rock Nine, Melba Patillo Beals, Black, we have a pretty impressive collection of Black female memoirs that we have read, enjoyed, learned a lot from down through I would dare say, hey, go nab any of the folks who have a book club, Black female or otherwise, see how many Black female autobiographies they have read over their time on the air. I'll put our record up against pretty much anybody out there. Unless all they read is biographies by Black females, I'll put our record up against anybody. We've read quite a few, and we'll be adding to that record. Leonida McLean, all of her journal collections, read that too. But adding to that number, this Thursday, Dr. Maya Angelou, again, The Heart of a Woman. All that San Fran influence. Told you they had her statue out in front of the main San Francisco Public Library. She too encouraged reading and writing, but certainly reading. Cannot wait. They didn't even have, I said that stuck out to me too, man. They had displays at the library, at the San Francisco Public Library. They had displays of Dr. Maya Angelou's works, important major figure in Bay Area history for sure. But the displays that I saw where they had listings of her different books, because they read I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. I think that was their book for the whole city to read for the month of November, and then they get together at the library to discuss. So cool. I thought about attending, but I was always doing other stuff during that time since I've already read that book. But they had different books of hers on display. The Heart of a Woman was not one of those books. That I also thought was interesting. Like I said, Lumumba is right there in the text and everything. Why would they not include this one? Like, they've got all these. I think they do have that book in the San Francisco Public Library. Why wouldn't this be a part of the display? Why wouldn't they highlight this as a part of her great works that people should study and think about? We will fill in the void Thursday. And listener might even be able to assist, see if we can get the version where she is narrating. I always prefer to have the author narrating, and then if we can hear, the great Dr. Angelou herself telling her own story about her life and times and what she thought about what was happening with Lumumba, does not get any better. Great double dip. See if she mentions Andre Bloom. That would even be a, great cherry on top if we get that sort of follow-up to what we just finished up. And I have to go back. I'm going to have to see Soundtrack to Coup d'etat again, because some of this was CIA infiltrated on this side of the world too, which shouldn't be a surprise. But all of the Black people who were protesting or talking about Lumumba, things that were happening on the continent of Africa. I think Maya Angelou went to Africa during this time too. For sure, she probably has CIA files as well, where they're keeping up with her activities, who was she talking to, tapping her phone, and all the rest of it. So yeah, we'll keep all that in mind. I should have see if I was still in Stanford. I would have checked to see, do they have a file on Maya Angelou at Stanford? Anywho, let's see. Make sure we didn't miss anybody, especially make sure we didn't have any parents lollygagging. If you have any recommendations for folks with young children, 10, 9, 4, being terrorized by white children at school, if you have any thoughts, get a hand up. Don't be spectating, lollygagging. Again, we'll be here Wednesday, Thursday, normal time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Invest if you think the cows is constructive. Hit the blog, racism-notes.blogspot.com, racism-notes.blogspot.com. Listener-supported counter-racist radio. You'll see the PayPal button top right corner. Beneath the button, you'll see the links for Cash App, Venmo, and PayPal. Enormous gratitude for all of the listeners who kept us broadcasting for, it'll be 16 years. We get to February. You can also hit the wish list. Jeff Bezos' Amazon under Gus T. Renegade. Huge thanks to all of the investors who've nabbed an item or 6 over our 16 years. Hopefully we have been worthy of your time and energy. hopefully folks getting through the holidays safe. I should have said at the beginning, sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy. Got to do celebrating, happy hour, job related, school related, family related. You do not want to be out and about, especially after it gets dark, after 9, 10. You do not want to be out and about. They have so it is the 21st, so we got the solstice today, pretty much holiday official now. They probably will have sobriety checkpoints from now to the end of the year. If you have younger drivers, we talked about children a lot, tell them you do not want to be out and about late. Get somewhere and sit down. If you want to party and reunion with your homies and all that stuff, fine. Get to one spot and sit down. You can have slumber party, whatever. Get up the next day refreshed, sober, hit the trails. But you do not want to be asking for trouble, and just there are other individuals on the road, and unfortunately you have a lot of folks who are intoxicated and driving, whether traveling or whatever, for holiday season. They got to get their eggnog spiked and all that with the relatives and all the rest of it. So for lots of reasons, race soldier Roger Golubski's friends and such out on the road, you don't want them to be the ones pulling you over for sobriety checkpoint. Drink water. No soda. You don't want the sodas anyway. Red number 5, so drink water. Sobriety would be best. Do what we can to safely navigate through the holiday terrain, so-called. Nabbed everybody. Didn't miss anyone if they had thoughts, suggestions to share. We will be here on Wednesday, well, we will be here Thursday, but before that, we will be here on Wednesday. If you've got through the day without grousing and complaining about what you did get or didn't get or whatever else, tune in. I guess they cook that day too. Hopefully you will have constructive victuals, lots of veggies, not all that country ham and pork and grease and nonsense for the day. Hopefully you can have some healthy victuals, and then we can tune in and reminisce about Dr. Welsing being constructed with old Stanford race soldier Dr. William Shockley. We'll do it up 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Much obliged for folks tuning in. Hopefully worthy of your Saturday holiday weekend. Sobriety. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. No name-calling black people. No gossiping. No throwaway offspring. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
Man, I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.